Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into the deep end, breaking down the really complex psychological journey from anxiety to acceptance in cuckolding. We're using insights from the work Loving the Bowl to map out a path that actually confronts our deepest insecurities to potentially build an even stronger relationship. And it might surprise you to learn just how common this is. Research actually shows that over half of heterosexual men share this fantasy. But for the vast majority of them, it just stays that, a fantasy. It never moves beyond the realm of their imagination. So what's the big roadblock? What's filling that huge chasm between fantasy and reality? Well, the answer is a single, primal, and incredibly powerful emotion: worry. It's that ancient warning system in your brain just firing on all cylinders. And that's what makes this whole journey so incredibly challenging. So in this explainer, we're going to walk through the path from that private fantasy to a totally transformed relationship, and we'll break it down into a clear multi-stage process. We're going to cover that initial conflict, the internal work, the critical safety building steps, and then finally, the experience itself and what happens after. All right, let's dive in. First things first, we have to understand the nature of this fear. The worry that you might feel, it isn't some kind of bug in your system. It's actually a feature. It's a direct reflection of just how emotionally invested you are in your partner. When your brain is just screaming warnings about potential loss, about maybe not being enough, that is not a sign that you're not cut out for this. It's simply a measure of how much you cherish your partner and the connection you have. And this right here is the core insight that can really start the transformation. See, worry and arousal, they're not opposites. They're much more like dance partners. The very same tension that ties your stomach in knots is coming from the exact same source as the electric energy that makes the whole dynamic feel so charged. So the goal isn't to eliminate the fear, but to learn how to dance with it. So how does this process actually get started? Let's take a look at the first two stages. They're all about doing the internal work and then taking a crucial, vulnerable step. So the whole transformation is laid out over these 6 distinct stages. It creates a kind of roadmap, taking you from pure imagination all the way to integrating it into your actual relationship. That initial fantasy stage, think of it like your own private sandbox, a laboratory where you can map out your emotional landscape. And this isn't just about what turns you on. It's a critical data gathering phase where you can identify your specific triggers, your boundaries, your desires, and you can do it all without any real-world risk. Okay, this is a massive leap. Taking this fantasy out of the heat of the moment and actually speaking it aloud in the calm light of day, it's a profound act. And honestly, regardless of how your partner responds, just that moment of vulnerability starts to dissolve the shame around the desire. You've made yourself truly known. Now we're moving on to stages 3 and 4, and this is where the real foundational work happens. According to the source material, this is the step most people skip, and it's exactly where most failed attempts come from. Not from the act itself, but from a total lack of preparation. Stage 3 is all about building an absolutely essential scaffolding of safety. This means you have to have exhaustive, detailed discussions. What acts are off limits? How are you going to signal if you need to stop? What does aftercare look like? I know, these logistics aren't sexy, but they create the safe container that's needed for any real exploration. And this is so crucial to understand. This dynamic is an enhancement, not a repair tool. The source material really stresses that if you introduce this level of intensity into a partnership that's already struggling, it's almost always going to amplify the existing problems, not solve them. So instead of just jumping straight into the deep end, this stage is all about incremental exposure. Maybe it starts with watching your partner flirt across a room, or maybe she goes on a date while you get text updates. Every small step lets your nervous system adapt and gives you invaluable data on what specific conditions help you feel safe and aroused. And now, we get to the moments where all that planning and all that theory meet the raw intensity of reality. Because even with the most perfect preparation, that first encounter is a uniquely transformative moment. This is the crucible. It's that moment of peak intensity where every insecurity you've ever had can just flood your system in this terrifying but also exhilarating wave. This is where the transformation either clicks into place or where you discover this path just isn't for you. And it's so important to know that either outcome is a valid discovery, not a failure. For those who find it works, this realization is absolutely key. The worry doesn't just disappear, it changes. You realize that her choice to share this experience with you, to include you, actually reinforces your permanent primary place in her life. The other person is just a guest in your shared world. And the experience doesn't end when the third person leaves. Reconnecting through planned reassurance and just radical honesty is essential. This is how that intense, raw experience gets processed and actually woven into the fabric of your relationship. It turns it from something that happened to you into something you did together. So, after navigating all 6 of these stages, what is the deeper psychological shift that happens? What does it actually mean to love the bull? This chart illustrates the core change perfectly. You move from a security that's based on sexual restriction, a kind of possessive model, to a much more profound security that's built on her consistent, free choice to be with you. You're not her only option, you're her preferred option. And that's a fundamentally more powerful form of trust. And over time, a lot of people who go on this journey discover a new emotion called compersion. It's the experience of feeling genuine joy for your partner's happiness and pleasure in a way that goes beyond ego and jealousy. Her joy literally becomes your joy. And this really represents the ultimate shift in perspective. You move from a scarcity mindset, where her pleasure with someone else is a loss for you, to an abundance mindset, where her pleasure actually adds to the total sum of joy and connection within your relationship. So in the end, success isn't really about being fearless. It's about consistent practice. It really hinges on continuous communication, on reframing the third party as a collaborator, on making aftercare a sacred ritual, and of course, having the wisdom to know and respect your own boundaries. This whole journey seems to pose a really fascinating question about what security in a relationship even is. It suggests that maybe, just maybe, the truest, most resilient form of trust isn't found by building higher walls, but by having the courage together to open the gates.